Hello and welcome to the next battle in the Ypres Valley. The French are guarding the bridge over the Erna River. Their task is to simply make sure that they do not lose that bridge to the enemy. They've set up a defensive position which I think has a lot in its favour. Now let's have a look at it. Even though their forces have been split by the Ypres River, their left flank anchors on some very high terrain that the enemy have to come around. And remember, this gap doesn't exist. It's only there for me to be able to move around in. Their right flank is protected by their cavalry, which are carbineers. And interestingly enough, the French do not have a lot of cavalry this time. Generally they depend on their cavalry. They only have one regiment of carbineers. They wear cuirasses, they're heavy cavalry, hard hitting, but that's all they've got. Over here they have Italian grenadiers, and left of them light grenadiers, and then the 27th Regiment, 3 battalions guarding that flank. Their baggage train is set up back here, and oh, they're having a barbecue of horse steaks. How very French of them. And that's protected by the Paris Municipal Guard, their militia, so we don't really expect a lot from them, but you know, they're there to protect the baggage train. They'll probably pilfer it more than protect it. Their artillery, interestingly enough, is made up of 2 heavy guns and a horse gun, which gives the horse gun quite a bit of mobility to go with the cavalry and perhaps make up for the cavalry's lack in numbers. But I asked the French commander, through an interpreter because I can't speak French very well, why, if he's protecting this bridge, he didn't fortify that village to the max and defend further out. And his reason was, one, he needed the villagers on his side. He needed them for food, for accommodation, and he didn't want them to become partisans, sniping and assassinating his men in 1s and 2s, etc. So he actually pulled back from the village, and if it's going to be damaged in any way, he wants the approaching allies to be responsible for it. So that's why he's pulled back actually onto the bridge. There's his personal little troop of Mamelukes that he bought, that have come back from Egypt with the emperor and been assigned to this commander for the day, and his messengers are there ready to go out. The artillery is on high ground, so he'll be able to shoot over the heads of his own infantry, and that makes for an interesting defensive position, because no matter where the enemy come from, and it's pretty clear if they've got to take the bridge, they're going to come down this road, the artillery will be able to fire at them the whole time, and if they move over to the flank to try and come in that way, the artillery will be able to cover the flank as well with these open ground over here. So that's the French defensive position. They know that the Allies are coming down this way, and they're all set for them. So now we have to see, when the Allies arrive, how they set up their positions ready to try and take this bridge. The Allies have arrived, and they truly are a mixed bunch. We've got on the Allies' right flank Prussians, and in the middle we've got a couple of Scottish regiments, King's German Legion and Spanish militia. Let's have a closer look at this and the way they've set up. Now, this is the Allied left flank, and you can see that there's 2 regiments of Scots there, Scottish troops, King's German Legion, Spanish cuirassiers, KGL, King's German Legion Light Cavalry, and they've got 2 field guns. Oh, and as promised, there is a rocket battery they brought along with them, so you can see how that works. But 2 field guns against French heavies. But look at the way the British commanders set up. They're actually covered by that little hill with trees on it from view from the heavies, as well as the buildings. So he's not going to let his field guns be damaged by the French heavies. So they're sort of hiding on this left flank, and no doubt they're going to cause the French some mischief there. But it's not a lot, is it? Over in the centre, and we'll go around there now, the Prussians have their light troops. They've moved into the farmhouse where they're holding that. There's the Spanish militia guarding the baggage train. Oh look, and the British having a barbecue too, a pig on a spit. So horse steaks on one side, pig on a spit on the other. The smell of that cooking food must be distracting to the troops in the max. Over here we have 2 Prussian line regiments making up the 10th Coburg, and supported by Prussian Guard infantry. They're powerful. And the Hussars, the Pritzwitz Hussars, so there. Now right over on this other flank, there's 2 regiments of dragoons, and they're way out on the flank. So the battle plan, and I just happen to know what it is because I can talk to this commander as well, is the Prussians are going to attack the French left flank and try and sweep it away, then cross the river and continue attacking French troops over there. But the Prussians don't have any cannon. The British have the only cannon available, and that's going to be quite interesting to see how that all pans out. So that's the plan though. The British artillery over there is going to fire on the French troops and try and annoy them. Maybe they're hoping to bring the Carbineers out into battle with the British infantry cavalry, but it's not really up to the task. There's light troops there and Spanish cuirassiers against a massive French regiment of Carbineers. So maybe that's where the artillery come into play, hey, to reduce those numbers, try and weaken that flank. Alright, so it's going to be interesting. All we have to do now is wait for the first shots to be fired, and we'll be on for young and old. Okay. The battle has started and we've completed 3 moves. I thought we'd get a little ways into it before I bring you in, because it's really just kind of artillery firing at the moment. But what is happening over here on this flank is the field guns of the British are peppering this line here, causing some casualties, but really nothing that the French are worried about at this point. The King's German Legion have moved up and taken possession of these buildings here, but they're just holding them at the moment. The French battery is concentrating on the Prussian attack over on the left flank, and the Prussians, as they move forward, have the 1st Battalion here has paid a price of dead. The heavy guns with the horse gun are actually taking some casualties out of there, but they're being backed up by the 2nd Battalion and the Guards, with the light cavalry coming up. What is really interesting is these French dragoons, 2 regiments of them, are moving swiftly down this flank, and remember these tables are together. They're actually roughly about here, and these French infantry here have actually pulled back a little bit, and the reason for that is the French guns, the enemy was getting closer to the French troops than the French guns were, so to continue firing over the heads of friendly troops, they actually decided to pull back under the cover of the guns a bit more. The Prussian lights broke out from the farmhouse and streamed across this field and ran straight onto, as they planned to, this French line here. Some firing has taken place and casualties are mounting. The French lights, there's not a great deal of them, so I'm not sure how much longer they'll last. But anyway, that's the situation after 3 moves. Now it's starting to develop. One thing to note over here is that the British commander in the next move, and I'll just do that now, is sending a message over here to these troops. So he's going to get them to do something, and I have a suspicion, having spoken to the British commander yesterday, that it might be time for the Scots to sally forth and try and put some pressure on this side of the field. They'll take the rocket battery with them because it can actually move and do some firing, whereas those field guns can either move or fire. So the troops have to be very careful not to get in front of them, or if they do and the French and the field guns can't fire, then maybe they can move forward at that point. But yeah, okay, so we'll move on to move number 4 now. Move number 4 has just been completed, and the situation is that we start over on this flank. The British field guns are still hitting this line here, and they're starting to make it look a bit messy. The King's German Legion have come out of the village and formed up. They've got orders from the commander through this messenger, and I suspect they're about to advance. The Scots have already started advancing, keeping out of the road of the guns, still firing, taking the rocket troop with them, cavalry in the back to support them. Those cavalry over there, King's German Legion, have orders, but obviously they're not ready to carry them out just yet. Otherwise, the French over here are in reasonably good condition. The artillery, French artillery, as the Prussian infantry are getting a little bit too close to the French troops for the artillery to concentrate on, they switched their fire all the way over into the Prussian hussars, and the balls went straight through them, taking out some horrendous casualties there right in the middle. That's not good. Here, of course, the Prussian 1st Battalion is suffering mightily. It's right down. Morale hasn't cracked yet. The French are still in pretty good condition here, although the Prussian lights have taken out some French casualties, but they're suffering as well. Now, here's the interesting thing. Look at these dragoons. They've come right up on the flank, and remember, these tables are connected. They are just inches away, or yards away, from the flank of these French line. Now, if you're watching my video on tactics where we talked about combined operations, these troops here paid an awful price to keep the attention of these troops focused on them, and now these troops here haven't got time to form square, and if they did, remember, the cavalry need not necessarily attack. The infantry could just keep firing till the squares reduced to virtually nothing. Or the cavalry can attack and catch these in the flank, which is what they will do next move, I'm sure, because these Prussians are not sitting still. They are playing a very aggressive attacking game today. So it's going to get interesting in move number 5. Move number 5, I knew this was going to be interesting. It is not the end of move number 5, it is the end of the movement phase of move number 5. But I just want to show you what's happening. Those Prussian dragoons have, as anticipated, ridden into the side of this French column, and it's in a world of trouble. This French column here saw what was happening, thought, no, not having any of that, and it's formed square. The 2nd Regiment of Prussian Dragoons have attacked the square as they were moving forward anyway. So it will be interesting to see if that square holds. Over on this flank, the King's German Legion have advanced forward. I don't know that they're still within firing range. They might just be out of musket range there. And you can see the Scots coming forward in column with the Spanish cuirassiers supporting them behind. And of course they're taking this rocket this rocket firing group with them. What would you call that? Let's call it a rocket company. And the reason it's not firing is because it's got to get a lot closer than that to have a chance of hitting anything with those erratic, unreliable rockets. Alright, so that's the end of the movement phase. Now we'll go away and work out the firing and come back and see what happened with this cavalry over here. Now we have the end of move number 5 and the results of the cavalry charge. Alrighty, as expected, this 1st Regiment of Dragoons hitting the French line in the flank went straight through them and decimated the line, captured the colours, the whole works. But then they have stopped, their horses are a bit blown, they're reorganising, and they're looking straight down the flank of this group of infantry here. Now, because of the time it's going to take them to reform, this line here has a chance to get into square, and we'll see if they do. They'd be crazy not to, even though they're taking fire from the lights over there. They're having looked to their left, they'd know what was coming for them. The square held, the French square held, and the 2nd Regiment of Hussars are now in retreat. They'll move off, no doubt reform. Their morale's not broken, they just lost the melee. Otherwise, the guns are still firing. They're continuing to target these Hussars over here of the Prussians, and they've cut another sway through them with cannonball. So the Prussians are really doing it tough on this flank, although the cavalry here has made an impression. The British are on the move over there, but their artillery is all they've got going for them at the moment, and they're still peppering that line, which is starting to look a bit shaky morale-wise. So the French commander, and here he is, sitting up on the bridge watching his left flank deteriorate. Must keep an eye on what's going to happen on this flank, although I'm sure he's still feeling pretty confident with those cavalry untouched there. The one thing that the French have going for them, with this flank looking very shaky at the moment, is the river. It can be crossed, it is fordable, but it takes a little bit of time, and when you emerge from the other side, you're at a disadvantage till you reform, and there's a lot of French lines still waiting there. Moving on to move number 6. End of move number 6, and the results. The 1st Battalion of the 10th Line Regiment is in retreat. Now, the problem with this is there was only 2 line regiments here to the regiment, and because one has retreated, it's actually shaken the morale of this line here, which is actually refusing to go forward. The Guard are behind, but that line is effectively stalled. Over here, this French line came out of square, and they were the ones who fired the last volley to send that battalion in retreat. That square that formed over here broke, and with the men having nowhere to go, the Dragoons have dismantled that square to nothing. The lights have come forward in support, And now the French artillery will have a target-rich environment. Over on this flank, the Scots are coming forward. The French line here is really and truly down to morale testing level, but they've been very brave and they're holding on. The 95th, of course, have taken some casualties from that melee, and this is the flank now to watch. See, these light troops have come out, King's German Legion Light Hussars. Their orders, I believe, were to attack the guns if the opportunity arose. They've seen this line pull back to face the major threat, and they see the road open, but it's an illusion, because if they ride past this line here, there won't be many of them left to continue on towards the guns. But they saw them pull back, and they were partly hidden by the trees, and they thought that was their cue to go. So perhaps as they get a bit closer, they might change their mind. Alright, end of move number 6. Let's see what 7 brings us. End of movement phase number 7. Movement phase only. And I feel I have to show you these things because they're happening rather quickly and we don't want to miss any of the action. So, over here, the Hussars that got beaten in the square have moved away. They'll reform shortly and be able to come back. You'll notice over here, these Hussars have moved around the flank here to get onto the flank of this line, and they've turned up rather surprisingly. The line hasn't had a chance to do anything about it because it's concentrating on these guards. Remember, this battalion here is frozen. The guards march through it. They'll take the battle forward to the French here. Now, interestingly, the lights have moved forward as far as they can because of the river, and are going to attempt to fire on the artillery crew of this gun to try and put it out of action, hopefully. The brave dragoons who crushed this square here have formed up and are crossing the river now to attack the guns. That's right down the muzzle of them. That's not good, but who knows. And interestingly enough, the commander of the French has sent his Mamelukes out to stop the KGL lights. So that'll be an interesting little skirmish between Mamelukes and lights. Over on this other flank, the British Scots, the Scottish Scots, have formed into line and are going and are musketering with the Italian Grenadiers. The rocket troops going into action as well, and because they've blocked the fire, the targets for the field guns are being dragged forward now. Remember, when we were doing tactics on guns, I said they should be firing all the time, but if they've got no target, that's the time to move them, so they're bringing them forward. And of course the KGL are going in to battle with the rest of this French line here. So that's the end of the movement phase. Let's see what happens at the end of the firing phase. End of move number 7. So that is the end of the firing part of move number 7, which of course is then the end of move number 7. What's happened here is with the firing between the Prussian guards and this French line, the casualties have mounted, they've broken, and with nowhere to retreat to, they've surrendered. They've thrown down their weapons and surrendered. Over here, yes, charging into the teeth of the cannon, you know what? They were within a whisker of surviving that, but no, it's turned into a calamity for them, and they're now in retreat. They won't be coming back because they're in a retreat because of lack of numbers, not an actual fight per se. Over on this flank here, this line has broken. Mind you, the KGL is looking a bit sad. The Scots have fired on the Italian Grenadiers. as well as 6 rockets, which did some casualties and knocked a bit of a hole in their line. These light grenadiers are moved into line to come up and take their place, and these troops here have also moved in the line. And as of yet, this heavy cavalry still hasn't received any orders. It's like the French are luring the Allies towards them, and these cavalry will attack when the Allies are sufficiently worn down. So that's just what I see is happening. And these Mamelukes, of course, are going out to meet those KGL lights, and that'll be an interesting little Barney when it happens. All right, let's move on to move number 8. The end of move number 8, and the guns have concentrated now on the Guard as their primary target, see them as the biggest threat. However, these lights here are doing good work popping off the crew of this cannon here, and if they kill one more, that'll put the gun out of action, which they'll no doubt do next move. So they're probably going to achieve what that poor body of cavalry couldn't. Over here you can see the Mamelukes and the King's German Legion lights are getting ready to face off. They'll be in contact next move. There's a messenger being sent here, and I just happen to know that he's got orders for these cavalry here to move into action, because the rocket troop fired and actually killed a few of them, so they're not going to stand there and take that. Over here, the Irish Grenadiers are down to their last company. The Scots have taken heavy casualties, but they've got the 2nd Battalion backing them up. The King's German Legion have been, their morale's broken, they're off, they've had enough, and the French Light Grenadiers are now taken up that part of the line. And the horse gun, which was part of the Grand Battery on the hill, has been sent over to support this flank, so it's on its way. It's all happening. It can't last too much longer. End of move 9. And the lights over here, the Prussian lights, have fired and taken out another gun crew as they are attempting to take their gun and move out of the range of those annoying little pests. Having killed another gun crew, the rest just abandoned the weapon and took off, leaving one heavy gun firing back, and it's still taking casualties out of those Prussian hussars coming up. Alrighty, now the melee between the Mamelukes and the King's German Legion. Who do you think won? The wild men of Egypt or the King's German Legion? Well, it's the wild men of Egypt, and they took a fairly heavy toll on the King's German Legion, who are now in retreat. Down here, the Scots have completely annihilated the Irish Grenadiers, but that horse gun there is going to cause them some problems. The 2nd Scottish Regiment now has come into action against the Light Grenadiers, French Light Grenadiers, and see that messenger there? He delivered the message that got the Carbineers moving, and as they move forward, that jolly rocket troop, that's what I was trying to think of before, they're called a troop, fired a whole range of rockets, and only a couple actually hit, but they did do some damage, and that's just making the Carbineers angrier. If I was the rocket troop, I'd be thinking I'd want to be headed for cover fairly soon. So yeah, it's teetering. It's gonna all come together in the next couple of moves. It has to. Move 10, the end of the movement phase of move 10, and look what's happening over here. The hussars, Prussian hussars, in open order have crossed the stream. They're moving rather quick. That gun, if it can't stop them with canister, then it's in big trouble. Meanwhile, the hussars that retreated from the melee with the square are back. They've regrouped, and the Guard are moving up. Over here, This British line regiment has turned to fire down on the French light grenadiers who are engaged with the Scottish 2nd Regiment. But look, these Mamelukes, they've reformed, and they looked over and saw the flank of the Scots, and they're moving in to attack it. The rocket battery had to get out of the way of these French carbineers coming forward, and in so doing it's completely blocked the two field guns. But the Spanish cuirassiers, wanting to prove their worth, have charged into the carbineers, and the horse gun moved to fire down the flank of the Scottish regiment here. So let's see what happens at the end of the firing turn. The end of firing phase, move number 10. And look what's happened. Those poor Prussian hussars once again have been slaughtered by the canister from by the heavy French gun. And there's a lesson to everyone about the effect of canister at close range if you run into it. Okay, over on this side, interesting. The Scots firing down the flank and from in front have virtually annihilated the French light grenadiers. Their morale still holding, but there's only a company of them left. That's not going to last. The Carbineers lost the melee to the Spanish cuirassiers. Well, there you have it. It was fairly even, Stephen, and they're in retreat. Not disorderly retreat, just a retreat, but it's opening up this whole flank now. Meanwhile, next move will be interesting to see what the Mamelukes can do to the Scottish Line Regiment. Alright, move number 11 coming up. This is the end of move number 11. We've gone right through here. Once again, the Prussians are trying their hardest to push across this creek here. The lights have got across, but in so doing they've been fired upon by this ragtag bunch from the French line that retreated. So once they retreat, they're still a viable force, provided that they're in reserve, which they are. So, but in the firing from the guard, they've managed to kill 2 of the gun crew. So that's, you know, it's a happening thing there. Over here, remember those Mamelukes? Well, they rode into the Scottish Line Regiment and catching it in the flank, they forced it into retreat. The Scots are guard troops though, they don't just pack up and run. So they fought a running retreat but were still ridden down by the Mamelukes. So they're gone now, and the Mamelukes are within striking distance of, the artillery. So that's a bit of a worry. I think it's coming to a conclusion. The French horse gun, by the way, is ploughed a ball into the Spanish cuirassiers to try and slow them down, and those 2 field guns, having a nice clear line of fire on these retreating carbineers, sent a couple of balls after them and bowled over a few more. So it looks like it's going to be fought right down to the wire, this one. It's the end of move number 12, and the battle has been called. The reason for this is, if we look at the Prussians over here, they've got a full battalion there that just refused to go forward. There'll be some disciplinary action there, I'm sure. But these lights that came across and meleeed with the gun crew of the heavy actually lost the melee. Must have got hit over the head by a ramming rod or something, but they've retreated. The guard are pulling back because they ran into the volley fire of that line regiment with that line regiment there, and took enough casualties to call it quits. Now, are these dragoons ready to try getting across that creek again in the face of full line regiment plus a heavy gun? No. So the Prussian commander, and it could be old Blucher, I know he hates the French with a passion, but even he has seen that they've shed enough blood to achieve very little. Well, nothing actually. On this side, the Cuirassiers lost another round with the Spanish Cuirassiers. But as the Spanish Cuirassiers were coming in, the horse gun fired a ball into the side of them. These soldiers here let go of volley, which only killed one, but even so, when the melee was over, the casualties were such that their morale broke, and they just decided they weren't going to pursue the French Carbineers any further. Now, the French Carbineers' morale has not broken. They will reform and be a viable body of a few troopers to come back. But of course, over here we have the two field guns sitting there just waiting for them. This Scottish line regiment, and that's all that's left of the 1st Scots, is retreating. It took, when it was in square there because of the Mamelukes, it took a volley from the French light grenadiers, who also have a horse gun here they can bring into play, and so they've decided that there's nothing to be gained by going forward. They can't take anything. The rockets here have actually saved the day, as the Mamelukes, having ridden down the Scots, reformed and then charged the rocket brigade. It fired off its last 6 rockets and annihilated the incoming Mamelukes because they were so close they could hardly miss them, and so they didn't. But the rocket troop is now out of rockets, so the British commander is looking there thinking, I can't go forward and push the French off that hill. They've got two full line regiments. What he doesn't know is one of those is a militia and would run away after taking 1 or 2 casualties. But he sees a 2 full line regiments there, plus a horse gun, and another line regiment over there in very good order. He knows they've got a heavy, and what's he got to go forward with? 2 field guns, which as they're moving forward would be vulnerable to being charged at by the horse gun, and it could get on the flank, let go canister and kill the crew. So there's nothing to be gained there. And of course his Spanish Cuirassiers are coming back. They've had enough. Boy, did they look good today, winning 2 melees against the French Carbineers, but it's been the undoing of them. They've just simply had enough. So he's got nothing left on this flank. The Prussian commander's got nothing left on his flank that he believes can win the day, and so the British commander is pulling back. They didn't push the French out and take the bridge, but boy did they put in a fight and a half. It's just been one of those really hard fought battles, and then to lose, you don't know till you try. All right, so we'll do a very short a look at the battleground once all the troops are gone, as I liked to do, but it's been interesting. Over here, guarding these British supply train and gorging themselves on that barbecue are the Spanish militia. They weren't even asked to do anything that's militia, except guard the baggage train, of course. But wow, look at that battlefield. That is just been carnage. All right. Well, that's the battle over. When the troops are all gone, I'll sneak back and we'll have a look at a quick look at what actually happened today. Okay, in doing a summary today, what are we going to call this battle? Well, it was supposed to be the British forcing the French away from this bridge. So we might call this bridge over the river Erna. It's got a nice ring to it, don't you think? Just a quick run through. As you know, the French attacked down this side. They had some success with their infantry and their dragoons, taking the French on this flank of that small river there, the Ypres River. But then they tried to cross it at great expense to themselves, because the French had the guns on the high ground there. A whole regiment of Prussian dragoons, the Hussars, that's the remains of them there. The interesting thing was the lights did get across and actually bayonet charged the gun crew, but were beaten back. At that point, really the the Prussian commander decided to he wasn't going to achieve his objectives, and what was left of his guard he was pulling back. Remember, the Mamelukes went down that road and ran over the what were they called, the KGL lights, and in so doing then saw the side or the flank of a Scottish regiment over there, turned and charged into it, and the Scots put up a good fight. Their guard morale, their guard standard, but after a couple of pushes by the Mamelukes, they were ridden over. This area here, it was where the King's German Legion and the other Scottish regiments went to battle with the Italian Grenadiers and the French Light Grenadiers. The British field guns were adding to the carnage. Can't end the day without saying how great the Spanish the Spanish cuirassiers did against the Carbineers. They beat them in 2 melees, but as they were pushing them back, the French horse gun was firing into their side, and some infantry that were here still were firing at them, and they eventually, through casualties, their morale broke and they fled. So the British commander then knew that, the Mamelukes too, don't forget, after beating that Scottish regiment, turned and attacked the rocket troop that had been firing away during the day and scaring the horses and actually killing a couple of enemy troops. But because they charged them and were that close, the rockets could barely miss, and they fired off their last 6 rockets and did in the Mamelukes, which must have been a big whew to the British commander standing just behind, because if they'd gone down, the Mamelukes would have ridden across the field guns. But at that point, it was quite obvious that with only a couple of field guns, you couldn't go and take that bridge. And so the battle really ended at that point. Now, I wouldn't call it a comfortable win for the French by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a win nevertheless. And they did have 2 line regiments and 1 regiment of militia still there. Their Carbineers, although badly mauled, were still a going concern. Their morale was still good. They had a heavy gun and a horse gun, so they still were a force, and there was no way that the Allies were going to take this bridge from them with that. Although on a couple of occasions here they came very close to losing. If those lights had chased the gun crew off, they could have turned, come up the road and captured the commander. That would have been the end of it. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this battle. It really was a hard fought battle. There's a lot in it. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. At the end of it, I've got to tell you, I was exhausted. Anyway, if you liked it, subscribe, thumbs up, and I'll keep bringing you more. Thank you. See you next time.